Are you tired of the 9-to-5 lifestyle? Do you want more freedom to do what you want, when you want it, without sacrificing your current income? Then this is the show for you. Every week, we dive into John's journey towards financial freedom and everything he has learned since 2014. Real estate investing, cryptocurrency, stocks, private lending, foreign residency, tax saving strategies, infinite banking, assets protection, and much more. Now, here is your host, the founder of the Wealth and Freedom Nexus, John Rickgarn.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're listening to this. This is John Rickgarn, again, your host of the Wealth and Freedom Nexus. And today we have a great guest, Brett Swarts. Did I pronounce that right, Brett? Is it Swarts or?
Perfect. Yeah. Like may the Swarts be with you, right?
All right. Perfect. Brett is the founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions. And I wanted to bring him on, kind of share his expertise, but then also kind of going down the rabbit hole of a what if world, if you want to call that. Now, if you have paid any attention at all to politics and the Joe Biden administration, what they're trying to push, their agenda, build back America, so on and so forth, one of the provisions that has been talked about and truthfully has been on the docket back and forth for decades is the 1031 exchange. And should that be eliminated and or capped or reduced? Now, you can go to my YouTube channel. I have a more detailed video on what is the 1031 exchange. If you've never heard of that before, I'll just give a very, very brief overview. Say you buy a property for $100,000. It goes up to $300,000 and you want to sell. That'd be a $200,000 capital gain. But if you utilize a tax strategy using the 1031 exchange, you can basically move those proceeds into another property and defer those capital gains. And they're at the time of this recording, at this moment in time, there's no cap on that. There's no cap on the number of times you can do it. You know, in theory, you could defer, trade up. Maybe you have a $10 million portfolio when you die. And the best part with the 1031, say you own those properties, you pass on, it goes on to your heirs. Your heirs then get what's called a step up in basis. So they essentially inherit it as if they bought it that day at $10 million or whatever the fair market or appraised value is. So all those deferred taxes would essentially be wiped out and your heirs would basically start clean. Now, if you ask Joe Biden, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, a couple of other members of Congress, this is very unfair that the rich are rigging this tax, and we got to get rid of the 1031 exchange. So with that, I kind of wanted to go, let's say this does pass. The 1031 exchange does go away. You can no longer trade up your properties. You can no longer defer your gains via the 1031. So if that happened, what are your options? And this is where I brought Brett in. And Brett, maybe you could just first start out, who you are, what your company does, and maybe just, say we go into that hypothetical world, there is no 1031 exchange. What can we do then?
Absolutely. Thanks, John, for having me on the show. Excited to add some value to you and your listeners today. So, yeah, my name is Brett Swarts. I'm founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions, a multifamily broker by trade. I'm a lover of all things commercial real estate, all things 1031 exchanges, and all things passive or active wealth through real estate value add. And in fact, I started out at a young age helping my dad build homes in the Bay Area. And fell in love with the development process, the rental process, my mom and dad owning and running a business. And that was really neat. And fast forward, I had a chance to go to college, and I loved sports growing up and loved working on teams. I played basketball in college on scholarship, which was pretty neat. And then had a chance to join a company called Marcus & Millichap, where we learned all things investment, real estate brokerage, underwriting, and making and negotiating deals. And so that began the journey of the 1031 exchange. And by the way, the 1031 is great when you can find a deal, when it makes sense, right? In 2006, 2005, 6, 7, things were really hot and people were finding deals, things were working out, but then things kind of got inflated there. And some people got hurt because in 2008, the marketplace took a big hit. And
Sure.
that's where we saw friends, family, and clients lose half. Some lost everything
Ugh.
because they had too much debt, not enough liquidity,
Mm-hmm.
and because they felt trapped by the 1031 having to perform in that 45-day window, 180
Okay.
days to close. And that's what began the journey of capital gains tax solutions, in that we wanted to pick up the pieces. We didn't want them to go through that ever again. And so we learned about something called the Deferred Sales Trust, which I refer to as the Netflix way of exit planning and tax deferral.
Nice.
Whereas the blockbuster method is the 1031. Again, it can still be good, right? You can still find that. I think there's a one blockbuster up in Oregon somewhere.
Yeah, some of my
Alaska.
listeners are probably like, what the hell is Blockbuster? So
Yeah, but at a certain point, you want to have some more options. And like you said, just in case they take away the 1031,
Mhm.
we want to have an option for our clients that doesn't involve equal or greater value, equal or greater debt, like kind investment property only. But the biggest thing is time, right?
Sure.
Because the 1031, it gives you tax deferral, but what the Deferred Sales Trust gives you, including tax deferral, is time. Time
Okay.
to make good decisions based upon intrinsic value of the real estate, not because you're forced to pay within that. You're going to be forced to pay tax if you don't close on the deal within 180 days.
Right.
And so, yeah, we just consult and help commercial real estate brokers, CPAs, financial advisors, cryptocurrency influencers. We're doing a lot of cryptocurrency deals right now for
Okay.
folks. Whereas the 1031 doesn't work for crypto,
Mhm.
doesn't work for primary homes, doesn't work for businesses. It only works for investment real estate. Whereas the Netflix Deferred Sales Trust works for all asset types of any kind.
Interesting. Now, when you mentioned the primary home, so I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I know there's a tax exemption. I think if you're single, 250,000 of gains is tax free, and if you're married, I think it's 500,000. But I suppose if say you, I don't know, bought a house in Sacramento when you're 20, 50 years ago, and now you're sitting on maybe a $10 million property, obviously that 500,000 gain is going to be wiped out pretty quickly. So then with the DST or Deferred Sales Trust, then you would essentially be able to use that with your primary home as well. Is that correct?
You hit it right on the head, right? And This
Okay.
is why it's Netflix, not Blockbuster, because Blockbuster 1031 doesn't work for a primary. But we just did a deal in Palo Alto, an $8.3 million primary home seller.
Okay.
And he had a very large gain. He was single,
Wow.
above and beyond his 121 exclusion of 250,000. He was able to sell and defer the tax, moved to Nevada, and establish residency there.
Wow.
And start taking income from the trust at that point, which also helps him to lower some of his income tax. So these are all strategies that we help people execute on every day.
Okay. Interesting. Just kind of curiosity. And I apologize. I don't remember what podcast it was that I first heard about, you, capital gains tax solutions, and the Deferred Sales Trust. But, how did you, I guess, find out about this or come across this? Were you just bored and read the tax code cover to cover a weekend, or how did that work?
No, we were really hurt when the 2008 to 2011 crash, right?
Okay.
And so I was a brand new broker in the business, just barely making it in 2006 and 7. And I went from making a little bit of money overnight to next to nothing. And I didn't know anything about a deferred sales trust
Okay.
until everything hit the fan. And so my wife and I we're barely making it, and we're having a brand new baby, and she's at home. And I show up one day, and I'm like, honey, like we got a couple decisions to make. I can go back and get a real job, meaning in commercial real estate, you're 100% sink or swim.
Mhm.
Right. So there's no benefits. There's no salary. You either make a big commission or you make zero. And it's a very competitive environment. I love the business, but I went from making like a little bit to like nothing overnight. And my clients also went from like, oh my gosh, we're making money, to now we're competing with the banks. And so it's this financial turmoil, me personally, and them with some of their large wealth, that created the storm of opportunity to learn what went wrong. And so I did
Okay.
what every good entrepreneur real estate wannabe does, or commercial real estate wannabe.
Sure.
I got a side job, I hustle at nights and weekends at a place called Cheesecake Factory to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
My day I'd make cold calls, and I'd negotiate with banks, and I'd talk with other CPAs, and I'd talk with tax attorneys, and I'd talk with professionals that were doing things that perhaps, if you've read the book The Big Short, right, there's some people
Yep.
who saw it. And there's other people who didn't know what other people saw, and there's some people who acted on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out my manager actually in 2009 brought in a gentleman who's my business partner, played for the 49ers, to speak on the Deferred Sales Trust. And we sat there, we thought we were like the Navy SEALs of investment real estate brokers, right? And 1031s and tax. We got this figured out.
Right.
Oh, gosh, this guy's talking about Netflix, and Netflix is not even out yet, right? We're stuck in Blockbuster. And like most people, we scratch our head and like, this is too good to be true. But maybe if it's true, this will change everything. Mm-hmm. And so I became like an early adopter to it. Still very skeptical, but cautious, but started to send referrals, started to listen, started to review the deal, started to watch the surgery as a tax attorney put all the pieces together. Went through thousands and, I don't know, probably over 1,000 calls, right? Over the next 10-year period of time. Definitely 1,000 hours or 10,000 hours of study and repetition, right? And you look at this and you go, it works. 100% legal track record, thousands of closes, billions under management. But the biggest thing is it helped me to grow my business. I was able to retire from the Cheesecake Factory. I was able to sell more commercial real estate. And at the end of the day, just solve my clients' problems, because that's really what we're in the business of doing. I'm in the business of selling real estate or selling tax deferral stuff. I'm in the business of solving problems. And when you do that, you can help people get transformation until their next stage of life, which is moving out of that big primary home. Selling that cryptocurrency that you bought for $50,000 is worth $50 million now, and you want to start up a company with your college roommate that's been your dream, and retiring from that W-2 job for a recent client of ours. Saving a failed 1031 exchange for a client of ours out of Athens, Georgia, who sold a 128-unit apartment complex. And he's getting older, and he wants to retire from the toilets, trash, and liabilities. He's been doing it for 30 years. So depending on what the needs are, depending on what the outcome that people are looking for, we have the Deferred Sales Trust that puts these pieces together. And I just have never seen anything that does it the way it does it and gives the flexibility that it gives.
Sure.
And then you add on that Biden's proposal. He's our biggest salesman, right? He started talking about capital gains tax increases, taking away the 1031. We've never been busier. We've closed about 7 deals in the past 40 days. We'll close about another 7 in the next 40. And it's just it's little known and little executed, because not a lot of people know how to do it.
Sure. It's interesting you mentioned with Joe Biden being your biggest salesperson. It kind of reminds me back to the Obama presidency, when it was, all the talk of taking away guns. And I think, Smith and Wesson, quadrupled their sales that year, whatever it was. So, so a couple things I just picked out from there. So a lot of it's, the flexibility of this. So, the 1031, it's, essentially real estate to real estate and always trading up, obviously. As I understand with the flexibility here, you mentioned, say, gains from a cryptocurrency, maybe to a business, or maybe business to a real estate, or I'm guessing you can do the other way. Say you have a 120 unit apartment complex, and then you want to take all that and put it in, whatever the newest crypto craze is, Dogecoin or Shibu or something like that. In those instances, I'm seeing a lot of the flexibility there. And obviously don't have the time constraints. 1031, it's a hard stop, 180 days, go past that, it goes away. With that flexibility, is there, or are there any situations that deferred sales trust wouldn't work and a 1031 is still the preferred route? Just kind of a worst case, again, 1031 goes away.
Yeah, let's first clarify who this is for, right? So this is anyone who has a highly appreciated asset of at least $1 million gain and $1 million net proceeds, okay? So you got to start there. Single asset. So not 100 homes that collectively add up to $1 million gain, right?
Okay.
One property, one asset, right, that has $1 million gain, $1 million net proceeds. Now, there's one exception to that, is if you have 2 or more assets that or 2 assets that equal that. So if you had 500 and 500 or 300 and 700, you can combine the 2 to get to that $1 million threshold. But that's the gain, right? What you bought it for. Let's say you bought cryptocurrency or Bitcoin for $1, and now it's worth $1 million and one. $1 million. That's $1 million gain. That's good. That's the gain, and the net proceeds, like after the debt, after the closing cost, is $1 million. So those are the first thing. Now it works for limited partnerships, LLCs, S corps, C corps, business sales, artwork, collectibles, of course, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ethereum, primary homes, investment real estate, basically any highly appreciated asset that can separate partnerships. But yeah, what you're referring to is called optimal timing, and we really try to focus on this value for our company, which is giving our clients the ability to sell high and buy low. And that's what our parents taught us to do, John. They didn't teach
Mm-hmm.
us to sell high and get shotgun wedding into a 45-day engagement, 180-day close.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, some people make bad decisions when they have to make quick decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
They taught us to sell high and buy low. And like the deal, I call it the Monday morning quarterback, which really changed it for me. And it's the foundation of why I started my company. And it actually happens to be out of your home state of Minnesota, right? That's where you're at.
Interesting.
This gentleman happened to own a large building, $20 million asset near the Minnesota Vikings Stadium.
Okay.
And this gentleman has made over $200 million at this point in his real estate career. And this guy hates the stock market, loves commercial real estate, but it's 2006 and he's looking around with his 1031 binoculars and everything is foggy, right?
Yeah.
And there's like fire, like he's seeing like fire like way out there, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to get burned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, I'm either going to pay the tax, but I'm not going to 1031 until he hears about the Deferred Sales Trust.
Okay.
Like, oh, whoa, never heard about this before. Maybe I'll give this a shot. So he did. He sold the $20 million asset and he put it all into the Deferred Sales Trust. Now, at that point, you can put it to stocks, bonds, and still mutual funds, hard money lending, passive or active real estate. But he put majority of it into the stock market, which he hates, by the way. But he's like, it's better than paying the tax.
Sure.
Okay. Now, as well, he hedged and protected. It was conservative. He very conservative on that, right? Just like the Big Short, you can put it into stuff. As commercial real estate people, we always got to remember that you can still, hedge and protect over there too, which he can. So that's what he did. And 5 years later, the bank calls him up, John, and says, hey, we just foreclosed on that property. He goes, oh yeah, that one I sold to that crazy 1031 buyer? Yeah. Well, we just foreclosed on it, and we're just curious. Would you want to buy it back from us? And he says, well, maybe. What's the price? And they said about 40% less than what you sold it for.
Wow.
He goes, that sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Let me reallocate some of the funds in the trust into a brand new LLC.
Okay.
And he bought it back at 60 cents on the dollar. So I call it the Monday morning quarterback, right? He literally played it perfect, right?
Nice.
He sold at the peak and he bought at maybe the low.
Mm-hmm.
All tax deferred, by the way. This is the biggest kept secret. And this, by the way, this is what the 1031 exchange companies don't want you to know about. Your investment broker, I'm a broker too, by the way. They don't want you to know about it, right? They want to keep you in the 1031.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's that intentional by them, right? Because I'm a broker myself. But either they, don't want you to know about it, because they want to keep you in the 1031 because that's where they make money.
Right.
Or B, they just don't know about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't blame them. Like, they don't know, right? And this is the part where people's brains explode. They're like, no way, it can't be legal. It can't be legal. My CPA hasn't heard about it. And I'm going, no, it's legal. It works. It's batting 1,000. It's been against the IRS 12 times. All no change IRS audits. Over 120, biggest deal was $125 million deal in San Diego.
Wow.
There's a private letter ruling. There's lifetime audit defense. And the best thing is, John, we don't charge a dime unless the deal closes.
Okay.
So we invite you to bring your skepticism and your challenges and your CPA and everybody else, and let's go through it. Underwrite the exit plan, underwrite the track record, talk with the banks, the QI companies, the brokers we work with, the financial advisors, national law firms that have had clients literally pay $100,000 just to do due diligence, just to say, oh my gosh, it works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's perfect track record. But my business partner, tax attorney, it's proprietary, protected, one law firm that's doing this.
Okay.
Now, there's a couple copycats with stuff that we wouldn't recommend because they haven't really been tested by the IRS.
Okay.
But I'll pause there to see if that makes sense. And by the way, my role is the trustee. I'm a third party unrelated trustee. It takes a trustee, tax attorney, financial advisor, clients in the middle, and we all have to execute this. It's not like just forming an LLC and rolling it in there.
Sure.
Or a living trust. It's a active business trust that must be managed properly.
Okay. So I'm just kind of thinking outside the box here a little bit. So as I understand it, the biggest thing is you had mentioned your client had put the proceeds into this trust, and then there wasn't really a time constraint where the 1031, you have that 180, hard stop there. With the Deferred Sales Trust, is there some kind of constraint, or could someone in theory park it in there and pull it out, 10 years from now, or how does that play into it?
Yeah, super flexible. During COVID-19, by the way, I had a client who sold in Walnut Creek a $1.4 million commercial property. And the other client too, by the way, who sold the $7.6 million deal in Georgia. They were very cautious about what was going on in the marketplace, and they just kept it in the bank. And we're like, hey, there's some stuff that's really on sale right now. You want to consider that? And they're like, no, I'm not comfortable with it. Okay. Like nothing moves without their approval. Right.
Right.
And so it sat in the bank for months. Right now they're kicking themselves, right? Because they could have probably 30 or 40% more on their money right now had they made those investments. But there's no timing restriction. So this is why it's Netflix, right? Versus Blockbuster 1031. No timing restrictions. Also, you can put it into multiple assets. So we have cryptocurrency sellers selling, going into real estate, all tax deferred. There's no like kind requirement, right? Also the reverse. They're selling real estate and they're putting a sum of it into crypto. Okay. We gotta remember too, everything is based upon a suitable allocation based upon the risk tolerance of the client. So if you're doing the deal, John, right, and you said, oh, I'm selling my $10 million property and I have a very low risk tolerance and I want to put it all into Bitcoin, I'm gonna be like, well, John, like that sounds cool, but not with the trust, because we gotta make it suitable to your risk tolerance.
Sure.
Can you put a percentage of it into Bitcoin? Yeah, you could. Right? Do we need to keep some of it in liquid investment grade securities? Yes. Like some of the biggest companies in the world, Home Depot, Walmart, Google, Apple, Facebook, very safe conservative companies that you have to approve that to as well. Yes. Also perhaps some passive or active real estate. Yes. So these are all the things that we'll have to work with you on an individual basis. And if you're married, your spouse as well, based upon your risk tolerance, and a financial advisor who's securities licensed. And as the trustee, I'm helping to put kind of all this together.
Okay.
Right. And so that's kind of how that works. Does that make sense, John?
Yep. No, that does. So, all right. So yeah, like you mentioned, obviously super flexible, multiple assets, no time constraints. As far as, say, I'm 38 years old now, fast forward several decades, maybe I'm getting to the, end of my investment journey. How do I put this? How does the unwinding of the trust, play out, or is there an unwinding period? Could I essentially take that trust and then, okay, my heirs get it, my son gets it, my wife gets it, or, how does that play into effect when either I'm of old age and I'm done investing, or I pass on at that point?
Yeah, the answer is it depends upon your guys' needs or wants and your goals. So most of our clients are setting up, or have already set up, a living trust. Okay. And what you're receiving is a promissory note. So remember what's actually happening here. For example, we just closed a $5 million Bitcoin case for a client. She bought it for $50,000. It's worth $50 million. She sold $5 million of it, and she transferred into the trust though. And she received back a promissory note for the trust to pay her back that $5 million plus an 8% return over a 10-year period of time. Now, every 10 years, she can renew for 10 years. And then she can put that promissory note inside of her living trust, and her kids can step into her shoes. So it doesn't get a stepped up basis because she's not owning the asset.
Right.
She's a lender. She's lent the funds. She's a bank to the trust that owes her back the money. And so we call this lendership, actually. So you're a lender, but then she's going to use it to go build a business that she's going to be an owner in, with the funds managing that. So on that side of it, that would be a stepped up basis as the law stand. On this side, her kids will step into her shoes, right? Should she have kids in the future, and then they could continue to receive the income from the trust, pay tax on that, right? Ordinary income tax on the interest payments. If they dipped into the principal, the $5 million, they'd pay capital gains tax in that given year. Okay. And so the answer is most folks won't get out of it, but should she want to get out of it, like for example, at the end of the 10-year note, it's structured as a balloon payment to come back. Okay. And if the trust was not renewed, the promissory note was not renewed, all of the $5 million would be paid back. All the taxes are triggered at that point, and the trust would dissolve.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So now you had mentioned the promissory note, and I'm a little familiar with this. I'm assuming this is kind of similar to like a seller-backed finance agreement. Here in Minnesota, they're called contract for deeds. They're also called real estate contracts, land contracts, deed of trust, trust deeds, notice of trust indenture, and think about a half a dozen other euphemisms. With that being said, so as I understand it, you have the promissory note, and then instead of saying, one large lump sum of taxes, it's spread out, I'm just kind of throwing out numbers here, instead of being hit with a $1 million taxable hit, with it being spread out as an installment sale or promissory note, then maybe it's, 100,000 for 10 years or 50,000 for 20 years. Is that kind of the general premise of it?
Precisely. In fact, that's the tax law we use, IRC 453, which is known as the seller carryback. That's the foundation of the structure. This is why it's passed with the IRS, because they look at it and they go, oh, you guys are just using an installment sale.
Yep.
You can create it for the third-party trustee, and you're not carrying it for the original buyer, right? And you're selling it to the trust before the trust sells it to the buyer on like a simultaneous close.
Gotcha.
And the trust is establishing a new basis, right? Because it bought it for you for, let's say, $5 million, and it sold it for $5 million to the ultimate buyer. So that has no gain, and you haven't received any of the money yet because you did an installment sale. You did 100% seller carryback. So like, oh, it's just an installment sale. In fact, they like it better because you can now diversify. We believe they like it better because you can now diversify that $5 million and put it into multiple investments, which guess what is going to produce income, which you're going to pay tax on.
Right.
And second, it's going to insulate the ability for them to collect the tax because you've diversified the investments, right? Versus the 1031, which guess what? Some people lost everything. So what did the IRS make on that? People are 1031 for 5, 10, 15 years. 2008 hits and they go to zero and everyone loses. IRS loses, and the investor loses. And so this is the beauty of the Deferred Sales Trust. And that's also why it's not even being we believe one of the reasons it's not being even looked at.
Sure.
Right. It's not even being looked at on the proposal because it's a completely separate tax code.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned this, and this is my over analytical, and I'm kind of a numbers guy. I like putting pen to paper on numerous deals. In theory, I believe at the time of this recording, I believe that if you're married, the exemption for federal taxes is like 25,000. I'm just kind of thinking outside the box. Could, in theory, you have this installment sale, like you said, seller backed, maybe the annual payments come to $24,000, $25,000, maybe have a 40-year amortization period with the balloon at some point. Could, in theory, you defer, quote, defer the tax, and then the installment sale is coming back at such a low amount that it falls at or under the standard deduction or standard exemption for federal filers and essentially be tax-free? Is that even plausible, or is that going down the rabbit hole too much?
No, I think there's some wisdom there, and that's part of the beauty of the Deferred Sales Trust, in that you can take smaller amounts of payments per year. Let's remember why the IRS is allowing this in the first place, right? Let's take the Bitcoin owner for a second. This is a second gentleman, actually, who sold another one, Ethereum. He had Ethereum and Bitcoin. Okay. And their Ethereum and Bitcoin, they put about 100,000 of investment and went to 13 million.
Wow.
What is that 13 million doing for the government out there? Really nothing. It's not really creating any jobs, right? And also it could go to zero. So they're concerned about that, and so they put legal loopholes in place so that it incentivizes the person to sell and then go put it into, in this scenario, they put it into stocks, bonds, and mutual funds right now. They want to put it into a Lake Tahoe cabin on the lake and Airbnb it. And that creates jobs and it provides housing and rental income and commissions and all of this tax revenue. So the government's winning there, right?
Sure.
And so that's the incentive. Now, on the other side of it, can you lower the payment out and stretch it out? Yes, you can. We do it in 10-year increments. We're not going to do it in 40-year increments.
Okay.
We do like to see some income coming out within the first 2 years. Right?
Okay.
And we do like to see a reasonable amount of interest. And so there's a thing called commercially reasonable, right? So we don't want to do anything where it's moving into like tax avoidance or stuff that could look like we're trying to game the system. We really want to make it a win for the government, a win for the taxpayer, and everybody wins when you're receiving income. So depending on the size of the deal, right? We do like to see a good percentage of the interest being paid out, not just delayed forever, if that makes sense, John.
Yep. No, that does. Okay. And like I said, I tend to be kind of a, numbers nerd and get analytical, and I think my CPA rolls his eyes about every week when I, throw out a question. They're like, oh no, someone tried that in the 80s, they beat you the punch or whatever. So
yeah. Yep.
All right. So, kind of high level Deferred Sales Trust, again, if I hope not, and I personally don't foresee it. But if the 1031 exchange goes away, there are other options. If you have your Bitcoin, your Ethereum, your business, your commercial real estate, or any other highly appreciated assets, either now or in the future, we have an option available. If any of my listeners were interested in hearing more, or maybe even were still skeptical after listening to this, what's the best way to get a hold of you, Brett, and maybe learn more, see if this would appeal to their situation?
Yeah, take action, right? Massive action with anything that you've heard. You got some inspiration, maybe some curiosity now. Now you want to dig in. So we give you a couple ways to do that.
Okay.
First, you go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. It's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. And you can register for our free mastermind. It's our crypto DST mastermind that happens every Friday, where we tell the deal close story of the week. We bring on current clients. We're bringing on strategic alliances, financial advisors, realtors, CPAs, and we all try to make this super simple. And no questions are bad questions. And we're all hanging out in the community, getting to know each other, getting to know the structure, the strategy, and everyone learning in the classroom. It's like DST University, okay? So again, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, register for the free mastermind every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern. And then also we have a free ebook, Sell Your Real Estate, Business, or Cryptocurrency Smarter, by going to the same website. You can download that. Now, it's very important that you get with us early. I encourage everyone who's listening to this, if you're even considering selling something in the next 30, 60, 90, 120 days, that you get with us early and you start to establish what this is, how it could work for you, get comfortable with the clients, get comfortable with the structure, with the banks, financial advisors, the investments, underwrite your exit plan before you list and sell your property, right? Or before you're in the 1031. By the way, we can save a failed 1031. So if you're listening to this and you're like, but I'm already in the 1031. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we can save it, right? We can save it. Now, you want to work with QI companies that are accommodating. Not every QI company wants you to know about this, knows what it is, or wants to accommodate you. Okay, but work with those. We have those. Again, go to our website, send me an email, and we'll get you all connected.
Perfect. And just as a quick note, the QI stands for Qualified Intermediary, as I recall, right?
Correct.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thanks again, Brett, for coming on the show. I actually learned some new things myself, and I kind of tend to listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of books for the last 7 years. Hope all my listeners did gain a few nuggets from this. Be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. And if you have any additional questions or you think this might be a good fit, contact Brett for the Deferred Sales Trust. Thanks again, Brett, and we'll probably have you get on the show here soon.
Sounds good, John. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to share, rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. For more updates, check out www.wealthandfreedomnexus.com. Remember, nothing on this show should be considered tax, legal, investment, or professional advice. This show is produced solely for educational and informational purposes. Please consult an appropriate and licensed tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for specific advice for your situation. For distribution or publication rights or media interviews, please contact the host.